good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to the anniversary edition of our webinar series. A year has passed since we started this journey, and it was a hell of a journey. I'm Irina Cismaș, I'm head of marketing at Castify, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour. Today, I'm joined by Emilia D'Anzika, founder and managing partner at Growth Molecules, and Julie Persoffski, a respected go-to-market growth advisor. Emilia, Julie, it's a pleasure to have you both on board. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Today's topic has its roots in a comment made by Irit Izeps in the last webinar. She noted the importance of aligning CS and go-to-market strategy, a point that I resonated a lot in my own past experience in a PLG company. So here we are, ready to explore how sales-led and PLG organizations shape their CS teams and the impact of AI and automations on these structures. But before we delve in, like always, there are a few housekeeping points to cover. Firstly, this event is being recorded, so all registrants will receive a copy afterwards. Secondly, we welcome your questions and use the question tab, which is bottom right of your device. We'll incorporate the questions as they come, if they make sense in the context of the discussion. If not, we will going to monitor them, and we reserve 10 minutes, 15 minutes Q&A session at the very end. And until I suggest we wait also for the late joiners. And while we wait, like always, I wanna I wanna publish a poll and invite you all to vote. I wanna set the foundation for the discussion of today, and I wanna ask you, which is your go-to-market strategy? For the ones who are joining us live today, we have a lot of people. So give me 1 sec to publish the poll. Okay, so I think it's more on the sales led. So we have 60. We have a
landslide.
61 to 26 on product land, and 60%. Ooh, and we also have other. The person who vote other, please. I'm so curious. Please post it in the chat. I'll have a look. Up until now, we have 67 sales led, 28 product led, 10% land and expand, and 3%, 1% also voted other. Okay. Now that we also saw the distribution and see how things are distributed for today's talk, Julie, Emilia, could you, each of you, share your experience with both sales-led organizations and PLG, and how do you see the approach to CS differing in these models? Over to you.
Go ahead, Emilia. Sure. So the biggest, I'm just gonna, product-led growth has taken on many different forms over my career. It started with freemium, which frankly is a terrible name. So I'm glad we've shifted to product-led growth. Way sexier of a topic and way more intriguing. But sales-led, I'm not surprised by the results, right? Product-led growth is really time and place. So, sales-led growth tends to be the norm, the easiest thing to fall into. It's rooted in, history. Whereas product-led growth, you really need the right product at the right price and the right impact, like driving the right need, and a little bit of that virality of your product in order to create the demand and the ability to adopt, right? The ability to convert interest into actual paying customers and get them to grow within just the product in and of itself. So we don't see that many product-led growth companies succeeding to date. Lots of companies trying it, and lots of companies that are doing both. And frankly, I find that when they're doing both, Emilia, I'm sure I don't know how you feel about this, but I see they're succeeding more in sales-led growth, and really need to adopt and really understand how product-led growth fits in with their go-to-market strategy. It's not necessarily You can't just decide to be product-led growth and do it. And the same thing on customer success side. You can't just say, okay, now we're going to be customer-led growth or product-led customer growth. I find even with PLG companies, there's still a lot of companies out there doing I'll call it customer success-led growth of existing accounts versus product-led expansion. What do you think, Emilia?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, but I will just add a few things from my experience. I've predominantly spent the majority of my 20 plus years in more of a customer-led growth through relationships, expansion, opportunities, really understanding the customer journey and where there are touch points to have conversations to add more seats, it be introduced to other departments, that type of growth model. However, I also led a few years ago a product-led growth company with about 20,000 customers. And what I will say they didn't do well and why there was a struggle with product-led growth is they didn't understand the customer's journey. They made it easy to buy the product online, but then they made it nearly impossible to cancel or get support. And as a result, the NPS score was incredibly low. And the customer satisfaction, what people were saying in the marketplace about them when we weren't in the room was terrible, frankly. And so product-led growth has to be very intentional. And that was one of the biggest points of friction is too many companies say they're product-led growth, but the product team isn't talking to the customer or understanding truly what that customer experience is. Now, I will say there are plenty of companies out there that do understand it and are doing it well. Our team is currently working with a company that has 600,000 customers, very much a product-led growth company, and now they're starting to dive into the more enterprise, applying customer success to the larger clients. It's been a really interesting journey. What they did really well is understand the customer from the product-led growth experience first, and then start applying customer success. I think that's a better strategy from my experience, having lived in both worlds.
How does the structure of CS team differ? If you are talking PLG or sales-led, what are some fundamental differences in terms of CS approaches between the two models?
I think the fundamental differences from my experience is there is no customer success. The leadership often believes that the product is self-explanatory. You don't need a customer team for the majority of the clients. The customer success team is really only applied to the most complex enterprise clients out there, whereas customer success-led companies or sales-led, as a lot of companies say, they do focus on a more white glove experience, and then automation and digitization is applied on top of that. Julie?
Yeah, I think it's also just the structure in terms of the accounts that you manage, right? I think if you're going to be in a more, you called it a white glove service, which everyone can sort of picture in their minds as a great term for the enterprise clients, ones you really want to, handhold through the experience. That's going to be, your one to few accounts. When we're looking at a product-led growth organization and transferring that over to customer success product-led growth, you very much so want to have you said, I think you said like how many 600,000 customers is something you're working with, right? Your ratios, you're not even going to have ratios at that point. And so the product's taking that on, and then you have the people there analyzing the data. The customer success role then becomes analyzing the data, identifying the moments that matter, those key impact moments, and making sure that I like to think about customer success similar to a sales funnel, right? Like we very much so understand how we think through conversion of new leads. Customer success, you can think through in the exact same way. And that model works really well in the world of PLG because everyone's just running through a funnel, onboarding. Okay, what are the steps? What are those stages that your customers need to go through onboarding, and track those and see where customers are getting stuck, see where it's taking too long, and be able to adjust for that. So it's very efficient. It's very machine learning and data driven, which makes it in some ways a lot easier, because oftentimes when you're managing with that white glove, that one to few model, everyone's doing their own thing. Everyone's just, reactive potentially. I often speak with managers. They don't really have a clue about what their team is doing on a day-to-day basis. Whereas, with this model, you can really understand, but you have to have the data. It has to be clean, it has to be accurate, and you have to be tracking those moments and understand what the different conversion rates. Same with expansion. How do we get customers to flow through and adopt new product lines to increase their users? What does that piece look like?
Do you think factors like, I don't know, the company size, the industry, or different type of customer segments influence the way you build your CS organization? Are those... Then let's deep dive a bit, and let's try to give some examples of how you paint a picture of a CS team structure in a startup, and how does this structure evolve while the team grows to 30, 100? What changes in the way you fundamentally structure your CS function?
So I'll jump in here because I've worked with a lot of startups. I've been the first non-technical hire at a lot of organizations, and I work with a lot of companies going through that transition of a couple people in CS growing to many. And the biggest challenge is when at early stage, people are doing everything. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If you think about those three main phases of the customer success journey, you're onboarding, you're getting adoption and retention, you're growing, chances are your CS team, each individual is doing everything. They're assigned a couple clients and they're managing it all. But that doesn't scale, right? That's impossible to scale. And so as you add on more and more people, you start to segment out both functionality. So you have people focused on onboarding or adoption. You have people focusing on retention. Maybe even account management teams focusing on expansion. And then within those accounts, you're also going to segment based on the size of your customers. So enterprise, mid-market, SMB, and the different ratios and the different motions that team is going to be taking. And so the very exciting part about growing and scaling a company is constantly changing the makeup of your CS organization and how it's structured to meet the needs and the demands of both your team, but then also, Irina, you mentioned your customers, right? So how I would interact with a customer in the fintech segment might be different, will be different than I would work with someone in the restaurant tech industry, because the sophistication and the approach and just the lens of the customer are going to be very different. And so understanding the persona, I think that's a common misconception, where in sales, we often do personas or marketing, but in customer success, we also need to do personas. So we understand how to best work with our customers. So we're segmenting our customers based on their size and their industry, and we're segmenting our organizations, but also not too much at the start, right? So many companies are like, oh, okay, I have a couple of CS people. How should I be thinking about segmenting? And it's do it all. Monitor it, manage it, right? Track what you're doing so that way you can scale it when the time comes.
Yeah, I'll just add, besides geography, also culture is very different. I think of customer success when I've been to Brazil versus customer success in a place like Israel, in Tel Aviv, or versus what we're used to in the United States. Although Julie and I are both Canadian, and I would argue yet another experience there. So applying the cultural element, the expectations of the product, and then aligning, is it more alignment with the sales team with that seamless handoff? Are you willing to invest in enabling your sales and customer success managers to work together for common metrics that you're striving to achieve? Or is it more aligned with product, where the end goal is as little friction as possible, but at the same time, as little communication outside of in application. So the chat, real-time guidance with an application, very different motions and how you measure it. I think as well, the complexity of your product, which you mentioned, will absolutely determine whether you need a robust customer success team. I think, I can't remember the CEO's name, who said Snowflake didn't need customer success management. I've been in many implementation projects with clients who have been working on integrations between something like Snowflake and a customer success platform. And you need technical customer success application or people to apply and integrate these systems. So I really believe it starts at the top. What do you want to achieve? How are you going to achieve your metrics, that your North Star that you've set out for the organization? And then how complex is your product? Who is your audience? Where do they live? All of those elements will determine if PLG is even feasible.
Emilia, I never thought, you mentioned one interesting thing, and I never thought of the cultural differences, even if I see it in other aspects. And now I'm curious, because you mentioned that CS setup in Israel would be different than a Canadian in a Canadian company or in a Brazil company. You have experience on multiple countries. How does this change? When you say it's different, what does it mean different? In what way?
This is, I would argue, nothing to do with PLG or sales led.
No,
but
no worries.
I will say, when I flew to Tel Aviv to interview and hire team members, people showed up in flip-flops and shorts and t-shirts. And I thought, oh my God, I can't put these people in front of customers. This is not professional. This doesn't look professional, but it was a cultural bias I was applying to a cultural norm there. It's okay if you wear shorts and t-shirts to an interview in Tel Aviv in the startup world. Whereas in Canada, where I grew up, when I went to interviews, I wore more of a suit. I would not, well, first of all, it's too cold to wear flip-flops and shorts. Even in May right now, it's raining and cold in Kelowna. But I would argue understanding who your audience is and what they think is okay is important. When I was setting up a team in San Francisco, we were serving companies like MasterCard and Amazon, and the head of sales enablement called me and said, "You've applied this CSM to our organization to lead a very important implementation of the product. I don't feel comfortable working with this person. He just joined your company, and look at his picture." People will judge you on that. And so right away, we hired a photographer and had all the CSMs photographed for LinkedIn to have a professional approach to customer success. Now, I argue he was the best CSM on our team, but maybe, holding up a beer and dressed super casual didn't fit with the norm of MasterCard. They wanted someone who looked more polished. And so really understanding your audience should influence how you interact with them and meeting them at least halfway.
We have
not just, I was just going to add, because I did a lot of work with Uber Eats, and it was so fascinating when we started expanding and working with the different countries. So I got coached when we started interacting with the team from Japan on how to actually introduce someone and speak to someone. So even just saying things before their name or after their name was a sign of respect, and not saying them was a sign of disrespect. And saying certain things. Also, using different forms of technology. And so in Hong Kong, it was very common to use WhatsApp with customers, and video would not be something that would be well received. Whereas in North America, we are starting to adopt video as a form of communication. So there's all these different cultural, things to think about and understand your audience when communicating with customers as you expand to different geographies.
We have a question from Luisa, and since it's in the context of what we discussed, I'm gonna push it live now. So she's asking, what if one team, customer success managers, works in a product-led company? How can there be better alignment between the different teams? Julie, wanna pick this one?
Sure. So, what if a team of just one person works in product led? Got it. I mean, that's the easiest if it's one person, because there's less coordinating between all the other people. But I think, one of the communication is the thing that we often don't do the most. And I'll bring up the fact that we're Canadian because I think it's really interesting. We're Canadian, but I actually started my career in New York. And so I got some sharp elbows pretty quickly out of the gate and learned how to speak very directly. And then when I came back and I came back to Canada and I worked at Eloqua, about 6 months into the job, we got a new CEO and we got an American CEO. And about 5 months into his job at working at the company, he called the whole company together and he said, we need to fight more. I don't want you just standing and like swearing at each other and swinging punches, but I want you to argue more. And because we had this culture in our organization of being, just too nice. And so, and that broke down a lot of the communications between the different teams, and we didn't challenge the team enough. Product roadmap would come out, and instead of the customer success team saying, hang on a second, this isn't what we are looking for, this isn't what the customers are saying, or even better, this isn't what the data is showing, right? And so opening up that communication and being not forceful, but showing the data, showing the proof, to open up that dialogue and have a really healthy discussion around where things aren't aligned or what we need to be doing to better serve the customer is really, really valuable. And the thing that most companies don't do enough of is having product team members, whether they're developers or product managers, join customer calls. And so even with product-led growth, you still want to get on calls, you still want to speak to the customers, hear directly from them, and do a variety of different surveys. And especially in PLG, you have a lot more insights and you can see the customers doing things. So getting together as a group and asking, why is this happening? And then maybe even going and watching customers do it and use the product. It's all, you don't just take the data at the surface, but actually understanding why this is happening to better drive alignment with your customers is really helpful. And just don't be afraid to get on a meeting and have that conversation.
I'll add 2 tips, if I may. Is one, not enough companies are enabling their team members. As you go into your profession, regardless of where you are, you may be taught something and then you use it a few times. It may not be reinforced. You slip into your old habits. Ensuring that you set up a framework for your organization early on that teaches your organization, one, it's okay to have friction. I call them crunchy conversations, but to do it in a respectful way, in a framework where people don't feel attacked. Because when you feel attacked, then you shut down. Suddenly creativity disappears. So it's really important to say, it's okay to have crunchy conversations, but we do it with respect. And here's a framework we can consider. And one of the best books I read, I went into the Israeli culture very much from a Canadian perspective, the more British upbringing, and felt very attacked in my first few months. Didn't know if I would survive. I did 3+ years, but I will say Radical Candor by Kim Scott was one of the most influential books in my career. And I recommend it to everyone, especially if your company has a book club, you read a chapter a month, something like that can really help you align and set up a framework for difficult conversations in a way that's healthy.
It's such a good book. I love that one too. I remember also one of our developers in our product team actually, I just said, hey, what's the best way to communicate with you? Like, how do you like to receive feedback? And they thought about it for a while. And then they came back to me and said, we don't want you to tell us the answer. Like, I don't want you to say to us, hey, we need this in our product, or customers are asking for this. We'd rather you pose it as a problem and allow us to come up with a solution. And that worked really well for them. What I found is that didn't transfer really well to other organizations, where I would say, hey, I'd pose the challenge and I'd provide some data, but they wanted more collaboration. And so nothing really beats saying, and I've had this experience with the team, right? One of the first things I ask my team members is, how do you like to receive feedback? What's the best way for me to communicate with you? And so just spreading that around to other team members and understanding what, how you like to receive feedback, how you like to have open conversations. For me, I really respect the Israeli way. I worked with a head of product who was Israeli, and he and I got along incredibly well. But it didn't work great for the rest of the product team, right? Because of that, the difference in the communication styles. Oh, yes, Richard. Crucial confrontations. I have it in my bookshelf. It's also fantastic.
Emilia, I think that question, we also have a question that I think that's for you. I'm in a sales-led company transitioning into a product-led company. What's the key to transition current customers used to personalized interactions with a customer success executive into a more automized service?
Yeah, I would say if you're transitioning to product-led, do it thoughtfully and understand, again, I'll say it again, the customer journey and what's changing in it. Why are we going from sales to product? What are the current gaps? How are we going to fill them with either product enhancements or applying an application on top of it? There's so many today in application that can help customers where there are strong friction points. By 2030, the workforce will not have my generation necessarily as the majority. Rather, it's Gen Y and Z. They communicate very differently. Trying to get my teenage daughters to pick up the phone is impossible. I have to reach them on social media or take away their phones, turn off all access.
You at the dinner table, like Instagram messaging, like, hey, can you, pass this off?
At the table, yeah. So really understanding your client and why are you going to this new strategy and having a strong communication plan for your customers. Well, first of all, notify your company. I had a major product update when I was the vice president of engagement at one of the companies I worked for, and the head of product put out a release without notifying the CS teams. Our WhatsApp went nuts because no one knew what was happening, and I didn't know how to answer the customers. I didn't know what to tell support. I'm calling the product leader who's in another country. Yes, he did get fired soon afterwards. It was one of the biggest disasters. So if you are going to make massive changes, you need to communicate and train your team, and then you need to communicate proactively with customers in advance. I would argue 5 times, send 5 communication messages, have webinars, anything that's massively changed. The customer wants to know, what's in it for me? Why are you doing this to me? I like the way things are right now. So over communication is key.
Yeah, a big thing that I love that you said that was why, right? Why are you doing this? And I think it's a good point to ask yourselves this too. Why are you doing this? If you're doing it just for cost savings, is that the right reason? If you're doing it to create a better experience for your customers, well, that's a really great reason. And so you just want to make sure that you don't minimize the customer experience. If they're used to personalized interaction and they like that, what is it about that personalized interaction that they're getting? Are they getting too much, right? So a lot of the times when we start off, we do everything for our customers. And actually that's not the best thing. That's definitely not the best thing for you as an organization, but it's not the best thing for you as a company or for your customers because they don't learn how to use the product themselves. So can you replace some of that through using the product and getting better training and adoption? That's definitely something that's amazing for that customer experience. But oftentimes what I'll see in sales-led organizations shifting to product-led is they miss things, and then the customer doesn't get as good of an experience. And then then you're going to create that dreaded churn, right? And so, and some of it, you might just happen, right? But as Emilia said, mapping out, and she said this a few times, which is so important, mapping out those key moments where impact is happening for your customers, creating your product-led growth strategy to hit on every single one of those moments is incredible done right. But don't rush it, right? Don't rush it. Really map it out, test it out with some early adopters and make sure it's there, because once you go, full on, it's hard to scale back at that point.
I really like that both of you mentioned some things that are happening, and okay, we have to adapt on the cultural part, but also the next generations of CS are changing, and what we used to do, 5 years ago, is no longer, I would say, available, where it's adapted on channels, on different type of communications. And that basically brings me to the next question that I want to address. What is the impact of, I would say, technology, but I'm more into AI and automations on the roles within the CS team? And how do we ensure that the CS team is prepared for the changes brought about by the technology? How do we embrace it? Julie?
I was just at an event last week with a bunch of AI organizations and AI experts. And what I loved about what they said was that AI has been around for a really long time. It's just been made a lot more accessible to the everyday, right? It's no longer only available to people who are really sophisticated in technology or developers. It's available to us, right? We can just hop on and try it out. So I think it's really a really exciting time. But also there's, if you look, there's always been tools that have been able to create efficiencies. And I think the biggest challenge that we have when we adopt new technologies is using it effectively, testing it, right? But it's such an incredible way. Like, if you're going to write an email at scale and you want to adjust it many times over to make it more personalized, that could take hours of work for an individual. If you can leverage technology to make that more efficient, that's incredible. And so, playing around with, encouraging people to play around with technology, tracking what's working and what's not working, but also, and figuring and having a goal in mind, right? So what's the purpose with using this technology? Is it to create more efficiency? Is it to help you scale? Is it to help you be more personalized and customized interactions without drowning your organization with work? So using that type of technology to create efficiencies and tracking it and adapting to what the results show it's exciting. I actually have to say, like, I'm finding right now in CS to be a really exciting time because there is so much technology at our fingertips, but I think a lot of people are still really scared by it. I think people are scared that it's going to replace their jobs, which is nonsense. It just makes us better at our jobs. And a great CSM with some powerful technology that can help us scale, be more effective, be more specific, and track our work better and analyze the data. I think it's going to do incredible things for the world of CS in the next decade.
Yeah, I will agree. And since I just presented on this with my colleague, Sabina Pons, I have some great stats on this. First of all, it's here to stay. It's not going away. And PE investment in AI last year was 18 times more than 2013. So it's not going away. The other thing is AI tech is expected to grow by 200 billion by 2026. So companies are paying attention to it. If you're not, I can't help but want to roll my eyes. I was on another webinar a few weeks back, and it was focused on how to leverage Chat GPT for customer success. And someone wrote in, I don't have time in my job to even use GPT. I think it's wasting even more time. Kind of, held back at the swipe. But I just thought, well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're going to learn how it actually can help you. One, it's going to help you architect your customer journey maps so much faster. You're going to be able to see information better. Also, it will automate communication through the many different omni channels. I just think of how many different gadgets I have around me, my iPhone, my watch, my other screen, my computer, my iPad. There are many different ways to receive communication. And then thirdly, it enables customer autonomy, and it will enable a user or a company to move to digital or product-led growth so much faster. And then lastly, it solicits customer feedback. I think Julie and I will agree, NPS was very much created for B2C products. And while boards still pay attention to it in a B2B organizations, it's not used correctly, because it's not enough to ask, what do you think of the product in the moment? You might be really upset with an experience you just had, but tell me more across the entire journey. Why do you feel this way? So digital touch is here to stay. And if you leverage it in a way to benefit your organization, you can move to digital or product-led strategy much faster.
Yeah, you mentioned ChatGPT, and I also wanted to ask you, both of you, how do you, first of all, if you use it, and if so, how do you use it, and which are your favorite prompts? So, because I know that it was a debate. We are also we also prepared ChatGPT in CS. So now I have the chance to basically ask you live: do you use it, and how? Emilia,
do you prefer? Oh, okay.
You mentioned it. I asked you, Emilia, because you mentioned that you were in another webinar, and okay, customers said that, okay, I don't see the value. And actually, I'm not surprised, because I was monitoring some CS Slack groups, and I noticed that there were not. It was not embraced, the service and the technology.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to take it with a skeptical eye. What I mean by that is, don't assume everything ChatGPT is telling you is correct. Also, it may source a whoever they're citing. We'll go look at that additional information and find out, what do they mean? I mean, ChatGPT will give you very high level information about your question or prompt. As well, if you're paying for the service, the expensive, the non-free version, one is so much faster and will give you more robust information. So I think that's another consideration. And lastly, I mean, I'm an adjunct professor at St. Mary's College of California. It's very much a hot topic that all the professors are talking about. It's very simple to see if someone's leveraged it and hasn't put any thought into the answer. So if you're going to use it, make it your voice. It's very apparent if you've just copy and pasted it. And I tell my teenagers all the time as well. And, some of the teachers are now forcing, instead of a written paper, you're coming in class and you're going to write your exam. I want to see what comes out of your brain, not ChatGPT's. So really making sure that you remember your own voice, even if you leverage it so that you can go faster, is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's a great research tool as well, right? I think a lot of us are like, so caught on the topic of, hey, write this for me. I think that's really helpful, right? Take an email and edit it. That's hugely helpful. Make this more custom to a specific persona. That's great. I also think we are constantly trying to be, you're jumping on a call with a client, summarize, what does this company do, right? What is this for you? And who are their competitors? So getting some intelligence about that company, and actually, if we can integrate that even into our tools, right? So if you can integrate the AI information gathering about that company to get a good summary of that product, about what they do, who their competitors are, if they've done different raises, if people have changed jobs. There's so much information that to be an amazing person in sales or customer success, at understanding who our customers are, that takes a lot of time and work and effort. The best ones do it great. But if we can use technology to make it really efficient for us, we can be so much more powerful in our jobs and not spend all the time we need to do doing all of our research. So customizing our communication is so important, and not enough people do it. And that's a really powerful way to do it. And I'm just getting started. I love, using it to create project plans. I'm starting my own company. And I, quickly was like, hey, draft a legal, contract for me, just to see what it came up with. It's amazing for templates. Taking that, hey, this is where, and the first draft was, gave me even some questions. Well, it depends on where you're from and where you're servicing, like gave me some really great things to think about, to adjust and modify. I don't love so far my experience with design. I don't know if you've had any experience working with some of the PowerPoint. I thought maybe a new logo would be a fun way, but I didn't love that. So I'm going the traditional route, working with designers. I think also it has its time and its place.
I'm going to take another questions. I think there's a lot of activity on the questions tab, and I want to make sure that we cover them all. So a question from David: how have you used AI to develop better customer insights from qualitative customer feedback? Emilia, do you want to pick this one?
Sure. So I think leveraging and aggregating the data, and then looking at the outliers and who are the outliers, and then what is the majority. You can create heat maps with AI. So really understanding where are the biggest friction points, or if it's maybe the outlier is a huge brand, what are they saying? As well for patterns, right? You want to look at patterns. You can look at this type of information by cohort. Maybe a big release in your product happened in a particular quarter. Being able to look at that data by cohort faster is incredibly powerful. I think the biggest pain point when I was a chief customer officer was trying to work with our head of growth and being so dependent on him for data. He was dependent on Clary, and then aggregating and grouping that information together. And here I am sitting, waiting, and I've got a board breathing down my back for the information. Hopefully customer success platforms will be able to do this a lot faster for leaders in customer success. That's what I'm most excited about, because that was one of my biggest pain points. We had a CSP in place, and it was not the answer to help me to be able to do my job better. So I think that's where AI is going to come in very powerfully, is being able to look at patterns, group data, and then give you insights on how to mitigate the challenges.
Another question from Luisa: what advice would you give a startup with limited budget, but with a full-time customer success manager, to adopt more automation and AI when processes are still being out together and there is little team alignment? Julie, it's coming from a PLG, so I'm gonna.
No, fair. I'm just get alignment. That's the first thing I would say. That's the most important thing. You can't move forward if you don't have the right alignment. There's different ways to get alignment, understanding where that friction is and why people don't, why that alignment's not happening. And sometimes you have to disagree, but commit to the action, right? So not everyone has to agree with what's happening, but you do need to all agree on a path forward. And so I think that's really, the best way to move forward.
From Richard: in my last position at Talkdesk, CCAC company, I'm not familiar with the terminology, our AI-powered solutions were sometimes met with slight pushback from lower-level decision makers in our customer base because they were worried about the impact on their contact center teams. Headcount reductions due to AI. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would start with the why, right? Like really understanding they're worried about headcount reduction due to AI. Really dive deeper and go look at the data together. I think a customer success manager's role is to educate, right? And through education, you're persuading. So it's instead of just giving an answer or rolling your eyes or making faces that show that how can you not understand, what's wrong with you, really show that you're genuinely curious in understanding their fears. Remember, as humans, we are selfish. We are afraid of losing our jobs, of change, of losing our team. We want to look like a hero to our organization. We want to hit our metrics to get our bonus. All of these selfish traits about human beings result in a CSM's role of understanding, why are you afraid? Let me help you change this story so that you still look like a hero, so that the fears can dissipate. That would be my initial answer, is diving in deeper and building the relationship.
And what about giving them even a little bit more of that power and creativity? So, hey, we're not trying to reduce headcount. We're trying to make you've already shared with us some challenges that you've had in your ability to do, bringing up some of the things, and I'm sure there are a bunch of challenges that they've had in their job. And so what if, you could leverage technology to do these things and go more exploratory with them? How could we, do this better? Or what if we had a tool that could do this, this, and this? Let's not think about reduction, right? Ease their minds and make it more about imagine what this world could look like, or what your role could look like if we could do that. And let's go, sky's the limit. Let's get creative and whiteboarding, make them part of that decision-making and that creative thinking around how you can adopt this technology, as opposed to pushing it down on them.
Another question. I'm also very careful when it comes to timing, so I'm not going by the initial questions that we discussed. This question is for Emilia. If NPS is not used correctly in B2B, how do you suggest we measure customer sentiment or use it better with a metric that can be compared across orgs?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I just met with the company yesterday, the CEO. The company's just been launched in January. It's called Robata. I hope I'm saying it right. But we had a very rich conversation about NPS. And I think because I teach customer marketing at St. Mary's, I inevitably have to talk about NPS and its flaws. And NPS was created by CEO of a car company, a car rental company, to understand the sentiment of the driver's experience through the interactions of renting the cars. It went on to be picked up and made into this big thing at Harvard. And since then, now it's adopted by B2B companies. The issue with NPS is it's one question, 0 to 10. And it assumes someone at a 7 or at a 5 in that given moment is very unhappy with your product, but it was maybe something bad happened at work, or they're stuck in a particular moment in your product and they can't move forward. And this thing pops up with NPS and suddenly they push 0. So how do you get around that? 1, having that additional box, tell me more. And then 2, be very intentional by segmenting your surveys. Your chief finance officer has very different goals than a CSM. Why are you asking them the same question? Once you've aggregated all the data, I would also argue that you need to actually action it. Too many companies gather data about their customers and then don't do anything with it. I worked with a very large organization. We did a survey across 56,000 customers, and I gathered the data. I interviewed 100 of them quite in depth, and then presented it to the leadership of this organization. And then I asked them at the end, what are you going to do with the data? And there was a silence in the room. Why did you just pay me all this money to understand the voice of the customer? Like, this is just the beginning, gathering customer sentiment. You have to understand what is the sentiment across the journey, where there are friction points and opportunities to expand, and then action it. And it shouldn't all be on the head of customer marketing or CS. Product should be involved, engineering, how you're marketing to the different personas. Julie mentioned earlier that the personas you're marketing to are very different than the personas who are leveraging your product day to day. So you can do so much with customer data if you actually take the time to ask the right questions and then act on it.
I was going to jump in for a minute because this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. Because, you know, as you said, it's originated for a brand and more of the purpose of it was to see how your brand compared against other brands. So think like Pepsi Cola, you know, versus Cola, and you know, brands that with consumer brands with thousands upon thousands of survey results where you could really get a fair survey and accurate survey data. You know, huge challenges in the world of B2B is we're not surveying enough people. It just doesn't, like, the metrics and the analysis on a small set, let's say we're sending it out to a couple hundred, isn't accurate in the results when you're looking at a survey like NPS. So it's one of the biggest flaws in it. And in general, yes, it can be influenced on your day, but same thing with, I would say, as the original sentiment score with the world of NPS. It can always be influenced, which is why you need the numbers. You need mass numbers in order to get an accurate score. And so, and obviously, and absolutely, if we aren't responding, I stopped a company in launching NPS because I said, what are you going to do with this data? And they had no plan. And, you know, so if you don't have a plan, you actually run the risk of really damaging what's happening in your organization, how your customers feel about you, because if they respond in a negative way and you don't respond appropriately, that's really pretty a terrible customer experience. What I find works better, because I think that's always the question. Everyone knows that NPS is flawed, even board. They use it, but they're like, you know, everyone's searching for a different metric. And so what I love now about the era that we're entering in, with so much more ability to track and have AI tools and have different tools track what's actually happening. And so I see a world in which we shift completely away from NPS and we start focusing on what's actually happening in your organization. So looking at metrics like, let's just look at the retention metrics, right? Obviously, everyone's tracking retention and we're tracking expansion. Are we tracking adoption metrics? Are we tracking who's using multiple product lines? Are you expanding? And if we actually go there, you know, people using your product is a better tell than people responding to a survey. Obviously, we want to dig into that, right? So if you gather, you know, the group of customers who aren't using your product effectively, understanding from there how you can make it better. And so customizing a survey to make it relevant to, did you know about this product? You know, why, you know, and sharing and asking, have you started using this product? Maybe asking why, right? What's blocking you from getting more adoption? And so I think it's really important to look at the actual metrics of what's happening in your product and how customers are using you, and stop worrying about a score that frankly is used to compare brands against other brands, because it doesn't tell you enough about your business.
Thank you for the addition. We still have one question, and I want to make sure that we get it answered for Claire. So when do you think is a good time to split CS and customer service? Julie, do you want to take this?
Sure. So if customer service, you're meaning support, I would generally say I like to separate them pretty early on. It's really important for customer success managers to be a strategic, almost like a strategic consultant in your organization. And if they start doing support, they're going to always be at the support user action level, and it will be hard to elevate them. And so, keeping those separate, I think if we're thinking about, onboarding and customer success and that whole ongoing engagement and customer journey, that I like to hold on to being the same role, unless it's a very, very technical onboarding. I like to keep together as long as we can, and then split them once it starts to limit the scalability of our business, because it really helps create an incredible customer journey as long as possible.
Yeah, I'll just add, most companies start with a support reactive and eventually become a relationship manager. It's typically you're in support when you start. Even if they call you a customer success manager, you are really a support manager at the beginning until you have some processes and playbooks in place.
Because we only have three more minutes, I wanna you already talked about some data about how things will gonna evolve. I'm curious to know which are the skills that in the context of AI automation and technology, what are the skills that CSMs need to level up? What's important? And how can we basically try to make sure that we are on par with? How can we prepare for what's for the way the industry changed?
Have a growth mindset. You have to be open to change and be okay with being uncomfortable, trying new things that might not necessarily feel the way you've always done things. I think that is your biggest asset or way to succeed in your career, because our world is changing so fast. There's so much data being consumed. And if you're stuck in your ways or you're not continuously learning, you're going to quickly fall behind in this new world.
Julie?
Yeah. Be curious and ask questions, right? Never leave a conversation with a question that you still have about something, whether it's a conversation with a customer or a conversation with your manager or your product team. If you're curious, if you're like, why are they doing this? Or how can we better leverage this? Ask the question and engage in that conversation, and just be really curious about what's to come and how you can, you can jump on the tech bandwagon or the tech runway of what's happening today.
We have one more question, and I don't want to end this conversation without making sure that we answered all. It just popped up from Luisa. Are there any playbooks that you can suggest? And I think she's referring to playbooks in the role of AI and automation. Luisa, can you please confirm on chat just to make sure that we are answering in context? What were you referring when you were saying playbooks? Not sure if she will.
I'll just quickly answer.
Onboarding with automation. Yeah, so this is okay.
I think if it's product-led, it has to be a seamless handoff from sales to customer success, really understanding the client so they're not repeating themselves, going through the experience. The best example I can give you is go create a HubSpot account. It won't let you, even though it's free, without really understanding your persona and what role you're in, so that they can give you a more prescriptive customer journey. I think that's a great example of automation and a playbook that you should understand as you're building your own company, especially if it's product-led or automated.
Yeah, there's no generic playbook. I love that example. And just in general, with with CS and automation, first things first is map out those steps. What stages does your customer need to go through? What moments of impact do they need to achieve in order to successfully onboard? And then automate that, and then track it, because you're not going to get it perfect the first time, and figure out where those blockers are and then improve on it. This stuff is hard, but it's fun. So good luck.
Having said that, it seems that we are nearing the end of our conversation. And first of all, I want to thank you both, Julie and Emilia, for joining me today and for all the insights that you shared. And I also want to extend a big thank you to all of you who joined us today, because your participation and input makes webinars like this meaningful and impactful. And before I forgot, if any of you wake up in the middle of the night with that brilliant question you wished you've asked, don't worry, our doors at Castify never close. We might not answer, maybe at 3 a.m., but we promise to get back first thing in the morning. Joking aside, don't hesitate to get in touch with my colleagues or myself. We are just a chat or email away. I know that most probably both Julie and Emilia are available also on LinkedIn. I invite you to connect with them and extend the conversation and ask the questions. Stay tuned for our next webinar. I have more exciting discussions lined up for you. And remember that the journey of customer success is a marathon. And not a sprint. So let's keep pace together. Thank you, everyone. Until next time. Have an awesome day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.